Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello, my name is Marcus Williams, and I'm here with co-host Brock Morris, and today we have special guest author Pam Eaton. Pam lives in the deserts of Arizona, but she'll always consider herself a New Englander at heart. She graduated from Arizona State University with degrees involving education and history. While she loves history, it'll always take a backseat to the fictional world she stumbled into as a young girl. She lives with her husband, 3 kids, and 2 crazy but lovable labs. It's a chaotic life, but she wouldn't have it any other way, especially since they let her read an insane amount of books and watch way too many Food Network shows. Welcome, Pam. Thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to go over your 2 truths and a lie first before we get into it. And I'll introduce you to Steve. He is our scorekeeper, and you can see that Brock is still ahead. So it's a little bit of a contest between the 2 of us here. All right, so
it's really not a contest, Marcus. I mean, currently there's no contest to it, but yeah.
There's a contest, but there's no contest.
But there's no contest, at least not currently. We'll see.
Okay, yeah. All right, number 1, I was sued on my wedding day. Number 2, I'm on an FBI watch list. And number 3, my first ER visit was due to light brights being stuck in my nose. So number 1, sued on your wedding day. 2, on an FBI watch list. And 3, first ER visit was due to light brights being stuck in your nose.
Some interesting stories, regardless of what one's a lie. That'll be fun to try to dig into.
Yeah.
There's even some truth in the lie. So
being a little bit tricky. Okay. All right.
I like it.
Cool. So Pam, you talked about in your bio a fictional world you stumbled into as a young girl. Is that related to your books now, or how did you end up becoming an author?
When I was younger, I probably concerned my parents a lot because I had a very vivid imagination, but it tended towards thrillers. So, but as I got older, and I think this happens to a lot of people, school kind of butted out my imagination a little bit. I didn't get to read as much for enjoyment, and being a history major, all I did was read history books. And so I didn't really have any time to read things I wanted to read. And then when I was during my master's program, I started to read again. And I always had a vivid imagination. I always had crazy dreams. And I had a dream one night, and I woke up and I was like, wow, that would make a cool story. And so I hadn't written down. I used to write little stories and poems. I don't know if you guys remember poetry.com. Do you remember that? I might be too old. But you used to be able to submit poems, and they would print them and put them online. This was a long time ago.
Okay.
Late 90s. And that used to excite me in little stories. But I hadn't touched that for a long time until I started writing this novel, my first novel at least.
Cool. And that was very interesting when you talked about education or the schools driving the creativity out of you. Even not just even at a college level where you're focused on a specific major or coursework, and you're so busy trying to pass and do all the other college things that are out there. But how many people, as I'm thinking about it, grew to hate reading because of all of the assigned reading they had to do, or the assigned writing they had to do in English class, and they grew to hate it because they had to do it. They were forced to do it. That's interesting. And I wonder how many other budding authors were maybe cut off their creativity. Stifled,
right?
Stifled, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So tell us about is that first book one that you've published, or was that one that you wrote and kind of put away on a shelf?
No, that was my first book I published. It's called An Extraordinary Few. So it's urban fantasy. So it takes place our time, but with fantastical elements. And I had dreamt the ending of that book. And so I had woke up and I was like, oh, that's crazy. And I'm like, but how did we get there? Like, how did I get there? And so, like, my main character is one person out of 100 in the world with superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't know it and she inherited it. And she gets recruited by the FBI and the government to do secret, like, operations. And that's my first series.
Cool. So how many books did it end up being?
It's a trilogy, so it's 3.
And it was that dream that sort of reawakened completely the creative streak in you that had gone dormant through college. Is that right? Like it that was the genesis of getting back into writing.
Yeah, and I had my oldest was 8 weeks early, and she had had a stroke, and she had had some other issues within the first year of her life, and I had really bad postpartum depression, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think it was a lifeline that that I really needed because it was quite a rough year.
Yeah. And, and that's amazing how your brain knew that that's what you needed. And whether I don't know if you are someone of faith or if you believe it's, from God or whatever else, but the fact that not only did you have a dream, but that you actually remembered the dream enough to start the story. Because how many times do you wake up and you're like, I just had a great dream, but I don't remember any of it?
And it was, and yeah, I am a person of faith, and it was also during 2009, so when the housing market crashed, and
Mm-hmm.
like I was 25, and that was a ridiculous year because I was Arizona laid off a ton of teachers, so I couldn't get another teaching job, and then my daughter was early. We lost our townhouse, and we had to file bankruptcy, and so it was a little bit of a ridiculous year, but I started writing then. It took a long time for me to finish that book.
Yeah.
And I think that's for a lot of authors, maybe not all, but a huge chunk. That first book takes a long time.
Yeah. I think we found that, excuse me. I think we found that to be true. It seems like that first one can be, I mean, we've talked to people that took 10, 15 years for the first one. And then after that, it goes a little quicker. But for you, what's your process of writing? Are you someone who likes to outline everything and figure it all out before you start writing, or are you more of a pantser, as they call it?
It depends. I want to be an outliner, like, desperately. I really want to be, and I am not, and it drives me nuts. I have a notebook for every story I work on, or I have like one of those notebooks that has like a couple subjects,
Mm-hmm.
and then like I will write plot points. And like I've looked at Save the Cat. My friend made me this enormous like dry erase thing for the Save the Cat method, and like that was great of her, but it was a waste for me because I was like I didn't want to do it. So it's a weird mix. It's a weird mix of plotting and pantsing and I have a really good friend named Kathy Cowley, and she writes historical fiction, and she used to be a English professor, and usually what happens is I send her my first draft and I say, this sucks, help me fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like my outliner too
Your
for that.
go-to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as someone with a history degree, do you have any other books that are more historical fiction, or have you stayed away from the history with your writing?
I've stayed away from it because I know what it takes. I know what
Uh-huh.
it takes to have to research, and people get so nitpicky on history, and I think they forget that not everything in history is concrete.
Yeah.
Like, even during my undergrad and graduate programs, I would learn things that I didn't know. And like I had learned a different way, and then I learned the other side of the story because usually history is the side of the winners. Yeah. And
Right.
that's usually the story we get. And so when you learn from the other side, it changes your viewpoint. But people get very nitpicky. Like, like hands down to all those women that write historical romance, because some of their readers get like super upset if they get one thing wrong, or if it's not even that it's wrong, it's right. They will come at them.
Yeah. So you just like, that's not worth, I guess as a historian, that makes sense because you know like how detailed and how much work it really is to do something right. And you probably have much higher expectations of yourself, I would guess, because of your professional, your background in history and your degrees.
Yeah, and I try to weave stuff in, like historical things in, like on the cover of my third book in my extraordinary series. It's called An Army of One. The picture on it, there's a place in the middle of the Amazon in Brazil called Fordlandia,
Mm-hmm.
where it used to be. So Ford came in like the 30s into the Amazon jungle and like took down all this land and put like a quintessential like 1930s Ohio suburb in the middle of the Amazon. And so it's really, I read a whole book about it and it just blew my mind because it looked so weird because they had a rubber plant
Oh,
there.
okay. Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
so, but I utilize a lot of things in history in my books, like places or like random facts that I know. Like my latest book is a dystopian, but here you have to look. But I don't know if you know who General Sherman is. He was the Union soldier during the Civil War that
Hmm.
was famous for his march to the sea.
Yeah.
I base my main character's dad off of him, and so and it takes that book takes place in Georgia, and so but I use history. I just don't really want to write historical fiction.
Yeah. So go ahead, Brock.
I was going to say that probably allows you to lean into the creativity component too, right? You're not as worried about the criticism, and you don't have to be so tied to actual history, right? You can pull in elements, but then that's my assumption, at least, that you could be super creative outside
Yeah,
Yeah.
that.
yeah,
Yeah, and maybe even peak interest enough that people will then go and research these different, you know, like Fordlandia. I feel like I would want to be find out if that was real or not, or if you made it up, and I would go down this rabbit hole of researching and reading about it because I heard about it in your book, which is
I mean,
cool.
I'll be honest, I just Googled it because I was fascinated by what you said. So, not that I'm not listening to you still. I just was that was really cool.
yeah. I never heard about it either, and I had to read a whole book on it, and I was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "This is kind of cool." So
So you decided to add it. That's
yeah.
cool. So at some point you made a decision to keep your books clean. Was that something that was just innate for you? Was it a conscious decision that you had to make, or how did that process work for you?
Um, I that's the life I live anyways. And I
Hmm.
feel like I read a ton and like I read a lot of books. And I was reading a ton in the young adult world cuz most of my books are young adult. And so and but they were not young adult books. Like
Hmm.
even though they're marketed as YA, like they
Yeah.
are not. There's so much adult content and language and I wanted to put more light out into the world
Hmm.
instead of like what there is. And like some of those books I enjoy, but I'm a much older woman. I'm not a 16-year-old reading these books. And so I wanted to make sure that also that so my kids could read them
Yeah.
because like I don't want to write any they do get a little like mom because there's kissing in my books.
Yeah.
So they're like, what are you writing? I'm like, this is tame. Like you have no idea. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is too old for them. Like I was just having a conversation with my cousin yesterday because he is making a short film for some film festival, and we were talking about one of my books because I said when you get famous, you can take one of my books
Yeah. Make a movie. Uh-huh.
and movie. And he's like, "Are you going to pay for it?" And I was like, "No, that's so expensive." I was like, "That's why you need to get famous." But we were talking about how like kids these days like it's even like PG-13 is so pushed. Like there's things in there that I watch with some of my kids and I'm like, ugh. So
Yeah, and sometimes I think, why do we burden them with that so young? Like, okay, their life is going to happen. They're going to get to a point where they're going to experience it or hear it or see it. But why do we why as adults do we decide to burden children with things so young instead of just let them be kids?
Yeah, interesting enough too is that my main demographic is not teenagers; it's adult women.
Hmm.
So yeah, and so it's to me what's interesting about that is that there's a huge group of people out there that will come and read, even though my books say young adult, they will come and read them because they don't have to worry about like open door romance scenes where everything is on the table
Right.
or you know things of that nature.
So related to that, how have you been successful in marketing your books to that? You said they come and find you, but have you actively marketed your books in a certain way that that has helped reach that audience too?
I think so. I do a lot of like Amazon ads, and then I do a lot of in-person things. And there's there's a what is it called? It's a guys. Sorry, my brain just went blank.
That's all right.
Oh, it's called Story Origin. I do a lot of newsletter swaps with people
Yeah.
that write in my same vein. I have a big email list that I utilize. But if you come to any of like if you see my like social media or you see my newsletter, it's quite obvious. I don't advertise that I'm like this is all PG-13, but like I I live the way I write, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
like I'm not out here doing crazy things. I don't usually swear. Every now and again it happens. It's life.
Yeah.
But like it's just so like it is what you get. Like I don't put anything that I also am afraid like my mother is gonna like have heart failure overseeing.
Yeah. And it's interesting and telling that adults are looking for YA novels, because of the assumption that they're going to be cleaner, but a lot of them aren't,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunate. I mean, there's some very big bestseller YA novel that I would like even beyond adult
Yeah, they're
level.
flat, not YA, right? And that,
Yeah.
I mean, Marcus, we've talked about this before. That line is getting grayer and grayer, right? That you can't trust just the genre of YA as something that is going to be even remotely clean.
Hmm. And people may criticize, well, if you're writing to this demographic, you shouldn't care about whether your kids can read. Well, why not? Like, why? To me, that's a great target to shoot for, is a book that you're comfortable with your kids reading, you're comfortable with your kids knowing that that's what you're in your office writing. And it's always, usually it's kids and grandma. In your case was kids and mom, but that same, there are people in our lives that we care about what they have access to, but we also care about what they think about us because of what they've taught us and the example they've set for us. And I think that's a totally admirable, acceptable way to look at it.
Yeah, it's and that doesn't mean that you can't have real life issues in your books. I have
Right.
one book that was a passion project. It's a YA contemporary, and it deals with life after attempted suicide. And I wrote that off of things that I had dealt with as a teenager and even
Mm-hmm.
as an adult. And I wanted to put a lot of light in it because like I wasn't gonna sugarcoat it
Yeah.
because depression, suicide, it's a hard thing.
Right.
But I wanted it to be like there is light at the end of the tunnel, or there's light in this book because there's so much that glorifies it and makes it hard, but I really wanted to tackle that. And it's something that I like my kids can read when like my oldest could read it now. Um, I'm like, you're 14, you could read this now, but I wanted it to be something that, it tackles hard problems without having to go down a path that takes the importance out of it.
Right. Do you find it difficult or challenging to paint the imagery of those hard topics in a clean way?
Um, no, Not so much. I don't think it wasn't too hard. There was like a certain situation where there was a part that had dealt with rape.
Mm-hmm.
But I tried to be I was very careful on how I wrote it. I
Yeah.
was very careful on how I dealt with the subject, how it was presented. So it wasn't gratuitous. It wasn't like flash and awe, but like you understood what had happened without it being glorified,
Mm-hmm.
without it being very descriptive. And I think that takes time, and it takes having like beta readers that can read it and you can ask like, how does this sound? Do I need to change this? Does this sound okay? I belong to a writing group. Like I actually have a meeting tonight, and we're all actually of the similar faith, and we all write clean, or whatever we bring at least to the meeting is clean. And so
Yeah.
like I can go to them and I can be like, what do I need to change in this, or what is okay?
Yeah. So, speaking of writing groups, what for you? What are the pros and cons of belonging to a writing group?
I think it's great to have a community. It's great to have a community of writers. Some of my best friends I met from being in this writing group. And it's, it's good to be in a room full of people that kind of understand like how your brain is not the same maybe as everyone else. Like,
Yeah.
like we go down weird rabbit holes that not many people do. And I love that. My writing group though is all genres.
Mm-hmm.
And so that um, can be interesting. It doesn't for me. It's fine because of doing so much writing in college and doing stuff with teaching. Like I can look at a story, and I even if I don't read in that genre, I can look at a story and know if this is going to work or not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what can be hard is where you are at in your writing journey, and sometimes that can be hard. If like sometimes it's like a give and take. Sometimes I am taking a lot more from them, or I'm giving a ton and
Yeah.
not receiving a lot. And so it's always a give and take, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah. As long as you know that in advance and your expectation is, you know, and I think, maybe because it's a group of like-minded people who have been through it and understand the process and the thinking that I don't know if you found this to be different, but maybe they are a little bit more supportive of that give and take, just because they understand.
Yeah, and it's pretty good. It's interesting. And you learn really quickly, like, because like in our meetings, we have like a little lesson and then we do critiquing. And you learn as the more you do it with like the same group, you learn, like, okay, like, I need to be very careful on how I critique, or like, you learn real quickly how to help others. It's called
Hmm.
like the critique sandwich, like you have positive and positive on the ends, and in the middle is where you do the constructive criticism.
Right.
But you learn quickly, like, okay, but this person can only take just like a lettuce worth of criticism, and that's okay.
Yeah, someone wants a double cheeseburger and someone else just wants a cheese sandwich.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's I think that's important, that just recognizing that everyone has different needs and is a little bit different. I'm curious, going back to this book your book that deals with rape and suicide and other difficult topics. Do you include kind of a content warning or trigger warnings beforehand in your books, or how do you deal with that, or what are your thoughts on those?
I don't, and I think that's like a it's every so you have some authors that are like, you have to have trigger warnings, and you have some that don't. If you read the blurb, it says something in there about life after attempted suicide, so it's
Yeah.
not like hidden, it's not like surprise. But I don't have trigger warnings. I know some authors do. And what's interesting now is some of them, what they have it is, it's not on like their Amazon, like, their blurb. You
Mm-hmm.
have to, it's in the book. There's like a link in the book, or there's a link to their website that you go to, which is interesting to me. But for that one, I don't. Um, it lays out in the blurb. I didn't think I
Yeah.
needed it because it laid it out in the blurb what it was. And so I was like,
Yeah.
I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. But that's interesting though that some make you actually go to a link and like you got to work for it to find it, and that almost seems like the antithesis of what the purpose is of having a trigger warning. And I'm kind of up in the air on it myself. I mean, I understand the reasons behind it. I understand the people who appreciate them, but I also understand, the authors who say, this is my story, and if you don't like it, don't read it, type thing. There's two very, I don't know. It's an ongoing. I see it a lot in writers groups online. It's kind of an ongoing discussion or even argument in some cases of whether or not to put it. So I was curious of your take on that. As do you think having multiple books out now? Do you think that being a clean author is an advantage or disadvantage in the marketplace?
I think it can be a disadvantage, especially I have, apparently I write in a lot of genres, but they're all in YA. But in the urban fantasy world, some of the authors, and I enjoy some of their books, but like they, even though they're young adult, they cater to that. Like what is it, romantasy? I think is the word. Have you heard that term?
Yeah,
Like that's really big right now. And so that can be a little bit hard, but I think there's so many people out there that read, right?
mm-hmm.
And one person doesn't just stick with one author, unless you're like my 14-year-old daughter who will only read the same series over and over
Over
again.
and over.
But
Goes phases.
I know, but like most people read, if they see it, like they're in a genre they like, they're going to read another author in that same genre. And I'm not too worried about that. I'm not super worried. Like it's fine for me. There's so many people out there buying in the US and like, well, in all the English speaking countries that I'm like, it's okay.
Yeah. So how do you then? I mean, I know you talked about how doing ads and stuff. Do you have? Do you find that your newsletter is something that's helpful to you, and that you have readers that are kind of like become your tribe and the people who really are interested in what's coming next and what you're working on?
Yeah, I think newsletters are gold. I think they're so important. And you'll have a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't really care. And like some people are diehard. I think they're super important. And like, especially in the indie world, like if you are self publishing and one day you want to do like Shopify and like direct sales, like you need that list.
Mm-hmm.
There's a group out there called, I don't know if you've heard of 20 Books to 50K. You
Mm-mm.
guys heard of that group?
No.
So it's all indie authors. Um, it's a large group, and they have a conference every year in Vegas. But it's not. It's called a different name this year, and I can't remember what it's called. But I've gone to that conference twice, and it's like 2,000 people, so it's a lot. It's a really big conference, and you have people making seven figures, tons of people like making a full-time income, and like all of them, I try to follow their advice as much as I can, but a lot of them talk about how important a newsletter is because those are going to be repeat customers,
Yeah.
and you want that.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I've heard one person say social media could get shut down, your account could be banned on a whim. Like these days, it seems like it's hard to follow all the rules and regulations and stuff. But your email list is something that you have and that you own, and it can't be taken away from you. So that's another way to look at it. Like, because I fought against it for a long time because I don't like reading. I get so many emails every day, so I'm like, I don't want one more email. So why would I send out emails something that I don't want personally? But then I found it to be true that people actually do open the emails that they're interested in, and they only sign up if they're interested in your book. So it was it was a tough process for me because I pushed against it for so long, just because I was like, kind of like door-to-door sales. I don't want to be a door-to-door salesman because I don't like when they knock on my door, but clearly it works because they still exist.
Yeah. Well, there's also the like, what the heck am I gonna say to all these people? Like trying to sometimes think of like, okay, what am I gonna write in newsletter? Do you really want to hear about how I just like sat at a swim meet and was sweating for like 2 hours because I live on the sun, in Phoenix? Like, so that was hard. That part was hard too. But
Yeah.
I what's interesting though is like I get a ton of emails too, and so like I was like, who's gonna want to read this? But I will open the emails from newsletters of people I really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a her name is Sharon McMahon. Her Instagram handle is Sharon Say So, and she just started a Substack, and so like I open hers. I get so many more that I don't know how I got signed up for, but I will read hers because I enjoy her.
What is it
Yeah.
about hers that draws you to reading it and opening it?
Oh, you want to go down a tangent on you guys are not looking at Sharon McMahon, you might need to on Instagram. Sharon says so. I started a couple of my neighbors and I started following her during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and especially during the 2020 election, and she would just give straight news without a political leaning, and I really enjoyed that. And
Mm-hmm.
then she'd also throw in like videos about whales and like dogs, and so and she is a former history and government teacher and constitutional law. And so, but it would just be straight facts. And I really enjoyed it. I feel like in a world with so much noise, it's nice to have someone who I could like listen to that is not going to push an agenda on me.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, and that's just proof positive that when it's someone's providing the content that you're interested in or you like, you're willing to open it and you're willing to read it, as opposed to the million others that I just delete. Because Brock knows this. I'm a clean inbox email guy, and
Oh,
he's
you
the
would have heart failure if you saw my inbox right now or my text messages. My daughter, it drives her insane. We're talking high numbers.
yeah,
High.
I'm on that spectrum, and I give Marcus a lot of anxiety that way.
yeah. Like if he ever wants to just bug me, he'll just send me a screenshot of his email inbox.
It's I don't open all of my newsletters, but I do think that, to your point, if you're genuine and you're real and people can connect with you, I think there's a reason. And you talked about this earlier, right? You address real topics in your books, and I think people find connection with that, right? And find relatability. And I think if your newsletters are the same, then your tribe, right? Your people, the people who are interested in your books, will absolutely open and read it.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it is such a great tool.
So for new subscribers, do they get a free story or a reader magnet or anything for signing up?
No, they should, but they don't. I'm not good at I there's so many things I want to do when it comes to marketing and it comes to all that. Like I know I should have a reader magnet. I know I should have a free book to give away, but I only have so many hours in the day, and I find
Mm-hmm.
if I spend so much time on the business end of things, I'm not writing.
Yeah. And that's a hard balance
Mm-hmm.
because the writers aren't marketers and marketers aren't writers, it seems, at least in my experience or personally. But you talked about Story Origin earlier, which is a service that I've used as well. And just, I'm not affiliated with them at all, but I love what he's doing. Just for readers, like there's a reader side of that where if you want to find new authors, if you want to become an ARC reader or read for reviews, you can get free books there. And I found a lot of really good books. And we interviewed someone who I discovered on Story Origin just the other day. So like, it's a great place for authors and readers who are looking. And especially if you're in a spot where you can't pay for, but you really want to help the authors and you're willing to give reviews, that's a great place to go.
Yeah, reviews are currency. That's probably one of the hardest things is getting reviews. Like I just did a giveaway of my first book in my Extraordinary series, and I
Mhm.
gave away about 12,000 copies. And
Wow,
I know it was a big, I was like, holy cow.
that's cool.
But like, I got maybe like 10 ratings off of that. And so you're like,
Yeah.
it's the hardest thing. I'm always like, how do these people get these thousands of reviews? And I'm like, struck. They must have amazing sales, which good for them. But
Or
I,
they're paying for them, because that still exists. Like there
yeah.
are still people who are buying reviews. But I mean, I go out because Amazon will have days where they have, I can't remember what they call it, but they have free ebooks,
Mm-hmm.
and they get a lot of authors. Yeah. So I'll go and grab as many as I can on that day. And it takes me a long time to get through them and to get to them. And I try to review them when I do, but it creates quite a backlog as well. So I feel for the author, because I'm like, I know they're waiting for me to read it and leave a review because they saw that download or that sale, but I'm working on it. I'll get there, you know? So is there something, like, if you could go back in time and give yourself advice at the beginning of your author journey, what would you tell yourself?
It's the same advice I would give myself now that I just can't listen to for some reason. But it would be to slow down. I wish I had my whole series finished before I started publishing it. But
Oh, okay.
apparently I'm super impatient and I could not wait to get that first book out there. And I wish I had my series written, and then while I was like getting it edited and proofread and all that, I could have been working on a brand new series. So there wasn't this time in between. The more I write, the faster I get. Like each
Yeah.
book comes out faster. Um, Not as fast as some people, but I I wish I would have slowed down. Or I like this time, like I just had a book released in February, and I wish I had gotten like done a street team and had given out copies beforehand so I could have reviews on the first day. And I didn't, I know all this, I just didn't do it. I'm not really good at always following through with things I know I need to do. I
Right.
just a little impatient.
So what would be the advantage or reasoning to release the whole series at once, just so that people can read all the way through it? Or
Well, like they call it like rapid releasing, and so like what you do, you could space them out even. So you have your first book up for sale, and then you already have books like 2 and 3 up for pre-sale, and you can release those like the next month or like 2 months out. But that way you have like people picking up the pre-orders and seeing that, oh, like the series is going to be finished soon. Because what's been happening a lot, and I some authors have talked about it, is that readers won't pick up first one, like the first book in a series, they won't pick up the first one because the series isn't done,
yeah.
or they don't see that it's up for pre-order yet, and so they're like, I'm not going to bother yet, I'm not going to bother reading this because it's not done yet. And I get it, I get frustrated when I'm reading a book and then I see the next book's not coming out for like 18 months. I'm like, oh, why did I read, like, because it was
Yeah.
good and I got like hooked in, and now I don't get to, I'm going to forget by the time.
I'm gonna forget all the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Um, you're basically using that momentum and giving them more, feeding them while they're hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I didn't do that either. I released as well, but part of mine was that I released the book one not knowing it was a series. So I didn't know or decided it was going to be a series until much later. And then even at book two, I didn't know how long the series. I read a lot of advice and articles on, is it three is the magic number? Is it five? Is it? And so it took me a while to land on five. And then I got to four and I was like, I don't know what five's going to be. I don't, it was actually my editor who said, well, what about this character that has kind of been a minor character throughout the series? I want to know more about him in book five. And I was like, oh, thank you. Finally, I've got an idea. So it's that would have been cool if I'd known in advance, but I had no idea. But so have you dived into audiobooks yet?
No, because it costs so much money
Yeah.
to produce them. Like the cost is insane. And then I don't know how I feel about AI. Like it's very divisive.
Yes.
I was at when I was at this one conference this past November. It was so divisive, and like one of the guys that was teaching, and I can't remember his name, but he's well known in the writing community, and he was like, "It's of the devil," and I was like, "Oh," um, but I don't know how I feel about it. Like it's on my would love to do list,
Yeah.
but I don't think a lot of people know the cost that goes into when you're not publishing traditionally. I don't think a lot of people understand the cost
Mm-hmm.
that we put up front. Like editing alone is my biggest cost.
Yeah.
And it's important, but then you're paying to edit, you're paying for your cover. Like I bought my formatting software, so I format my own books.
Yeah.
Then when I look at the cost of audio, that's like usually over $1,000. And so,
Yeah. At the low end.
yeah. And, I I have some acquaintances that all their audiobooks are now on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
But then they have to have 1,000 subscribers to start making any money.
Yep.
And some of them do. But I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm like, maybe when my books are doing better than I want them to be, when I'm pulling in a lot more income, that's something that I could be okay with sacrificing that amount of money. But I mean, if I did my series, it's only 3 books, but like that right there is, probably over 3 grand to do
Right.
that. And so
Right.
that's a lot of money up front.
I tried at one point. It almost worked. It didn't quite, but I tried reaching out to other authors because I had a book that I needed a female narrator. So I said, "Is there a female narrator out there who needs a male narrator? And I'll narrate your book if you narrate my book." Type thing. Do a swap. Um, and it just I was talking with the lady for a little bit, and we sent kind of test pieces to see, and it just didn't work out. But I just trying to think of a different option. Some other way to make it happen other than AI, where the narrator can get paid what they're worth, but the authors can actually afford it. Like,
Yeah. And I could not narrate my own books. It would be a horrible idea. Like I do not have the right voice. I do not have it. And so like I'm like great for people that can do that. Like my friend is probably going to narrate her own, but she went to school. Like she has the degree in like music something. Like she knows how to do all of that. I'm like maybe you
mm-hmm.
can just do mine. But yeah, I don't think I can narrate my own books.
Yeah, well, if you have a specific voice you're looking for and it's not yours, then I mean, you want the voice that you hear when you're writing, and that's tough to find. I don't know, it's a problem. We bring this up quite a bit because it's one of those issues that we believe is solvable, and we just got to figure out how. The answer is out there, and I don't believe it's necessarily AI. Um, I understand both sides of that argument, but I just yeah, it's got to be out there. We'll find it. We'll find it, Brock.
That's right. Yeah,
Change the world.
that's right. And it can't be so cost prohibitive like it is, right? It doesn't. And we had a narrator on the show, and it was great to hear from her why they charge what they do, and it's not without its value, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't want to make that impression at all either, but there is this breakdown, especially as you said, Pam, for those independently publishing, um, that they don't have the ability to invest that just yet. So to your point, there's a solution out there, and
Yeah,
by golly, we're going to find it.
yeah. One day we'll get it. Well, we are about out of time, so we need to go back and review your Two Truths and a Lie. We
Yes.
didn't end up working light brights into the conversation.
It's okay.
We didn't.
I'm a little disappointed in us. So let me remind everyone. Number 1, I was sued on my wedding day. Number 2, I'm on an FBI watch list. And number 3, my first ER visit was due to light brights being stuck in my nose. So Brock, what do you think?
Yeah, so to that end, the light brights, I am going to call number 3 the lie, mostly because of what you said at the beginning, which is I'm gonna say they were maybe Legos or maybe a doll shoe or something like that you went
Ah,
to
man,
the
those
ER,
high heels.
but that would mess you up. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and I've seen my daughter do it before, so I feel like it's something along those lines. But just for no other reason, I'm gonna pick that. They could all be true. But.
Yeah, okay. So then because that's what I was leaning towards, but I've been safe, and we're just not moving. So we got to move. Either you pull ahead or I catch up. So I'm going to go with number 1. I was sued on my wedding day. Maybe you were sued close to it, but it wasn't on your wedding day. Who knows?
Or maybe you sued somebody on your wedding day. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
That'd be a good story. You're both wrong.
Oh.
So, I mean, why would we assume you're on? Well,
She's on an FBI watch. What's funny though about that is, so number 2 is the lie, but my husband's cousin works for the FBI, and I was talking to him because I had in one of my books we go to North Korea. We I also had to like Google like how to make a bomb and escape prison, and so I was talking to him and I was like, hey, do I need to worry about my search history? And he's like, no, you're fine. Because he's like, you just Google your name and all your book stuff pops up. And I was like, okay, that's good.
Well, I don't know. It just seems like nowadays you never know.
I know. I probably am actually.
Who
What's gonna
is on a
trigger,
list
right?
and why? Like, what is going to trigger that? Like, maybe we are. Who knows?
To my knowledge, I am not, but I very well could be.
Yeah, it seemed so outrageous that I was like, well, maybe it is true. You never know. And if you were, would they tell you?
I know,
Unless, like
probably
you're trying to fly or get a security clearance or something. And you're like, by the way.
But no, I was sued on my wedding day.
Oh
And
man.
I was 4 and I thought shoving light brights up my nose was a good idea, and we had to go to the hospital.
I mean, that would look cool if they shine that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Dude,
No, it's traumatizing. I still hate light brights.
Well, Pam, thank you so much for being on the show with us. It's been a lot of fun. We've been a great conversation. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me. This has been a great experience. This is my first podcast. So.
Awesome. Well,
Crushed
it was great. Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone out there listening, go and check out Pam's books. They sound great, very intriguing. And please subscribe, like, share, do all the things for the podcast so that we can help it grow and get word out to more and more people about all the clean books and clean authors that are out there. We thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time on the Clean Library Podcast.